And one thing that I did to start my journey is that I asked myself 4 questions. And I got this actually from my brother, Dan Rouse. You know Dan, right, Brenda?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he's a dream manager right now, and he does dreaming sessions, and he talks about how before you start anything, before you implement anything, especially as homeschooling families, before we really implement something in our home, whether it's a new curriculum or a new system, even a new chore chart, it's important to ask yourself 4 questions. And the first one is why. So why am I implementing this? Why am I teaching this? Why is my family doing this? The second is who. So who's going to be involved? Who's going to be the ones being taught? Who's going to be the one teaching? Thirdly is how. So how are we actually going to implement this? How are we going to make it happen? And the fourth is what. So what are the specific details that we're doing? So we're going to go through these 4 questions briefly, again, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time, and I tend to talk a lot, just my nature. So the first question that I want you to think about, and I will actually give you a minute to just think about this, is why study math? Why is math a part of our homeschooling? Now, if you haven't asked yourself this question before, I suggest asking it, because I think a lot of times especially with math, it's just something we do, right? It's just, they have to take tests. It's a tradition. And so we need to make sure in our home that we actually ask why, that it actually has some purpose or place than it being more than just a tradition in our homes. So in fact, oh, I got it. Oh, I love it. Thanks, Val. She says we use it every day, like speaking. Yeah, so like our language, like reading, we use it every day. Now, a follow-up question that I would have to that is, what do we really use? Like maybe basic operations, right? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Beyond that, do we use math every day? What do you think? Yeah, so useful math. Finance, right? There are definitely some bits of math that we use every day. Anything else? Any other reason? Brenda, what do you think?
I have this memory of remodeling our kitchen, and I was pregnant and nesting and decided we were going to do it, so tore the whole thing down and wanted one of those little octagon shapes in the ceiling above.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out the angle to cut the wood at turned into a nightmare for me. So that was my geometry dilemma at the time.
That's awesome. There are definitely times where we use that or we need that, and we either need to recall it or be able to figure it out, right? Might not be something we totally have on hand. Angie says my husband uses math every day for work. There are definitely jobs, in fact, lots of them, where they're going to use specific math skills. Math is also not just adding, multiplying, it's solving problems and interacting with the world we live in. I love that. Thank you, Val. Because it really is, right? It's an interaction with the world. It's solving problems. It's critical thinking. In fact, my brother Dan was starting his own private school down in Arizona, and he asked me this question. He said, so why do we need to study math? And I had gone to school for math education, and so I was kind of his go-to math person. And I had a really hard time answering this question. A really hard time. Because I was like, well, you have to. I mean, it's just something you do. Like, you just do it. But I didn't, and I knew that it was more about problem solving and thinking. But when I looked back on my traditional math experience, I didn't have a lot of experience critically thinking or problem solving. Like, I pretty much just did what someone else told me to do. In fact, if we look at traditional math, the outcome that they want from us, is to create calculators. It's kind of what traditional math does. And when we think of that, it seems a little silly because we have calculators. So what they're training us to do, what traditional math is training to do, is to create students who can calculate, which is the way it's been for the last 100 years. And hasn't changed, even though our technology has so drastically changed. So in my mind, I needed a better why for math in my mind. And not only that, but I needed to make sure that once I kind of had this why of thinking and problem solving and logical reasoning and having a geometry problem that I might have seen before and going, I can figure this out. I can think through it. I can figure it out. I want my kids to be trained to do that. In fact, I found this really awesome quote by Albert Einstein, where he talks about the development of general ability for independent thinking and judgment should always be placed foremost. So you have to put thinking first. And when I kind of read this, and he said, not the acquisition of special knowledge, so not doing the process of procedures, not the calculation. We have to put thinking first. And then he talks about how if we do that person is going to be just fine. And not only that, they'll be able to adapt to changes, which is something that is happening so frequently, so constantly right now, especially with technology, that our kids have to be able to adapt and to change and to reason differently, right? So for me, though, there was this kind of divide happening. There was what traditional math trained us to be, and then there was my why, which was this, focusing on math first. And I remember going to my professor at BYU. He's who's done a ton of research on math education and on task-based learning, which is just giving them problems to figure out and then discovering from there. And I went to him and I said, all right, I'm going to start mentoring students, and I really want to make it about thinking and problem solving. So what kind of curriculum should I use? Like, what's out there? Because he also taught the elementary education math class, and so he had a lot of experience with that. Those age ranges as well. And he looked at me and he's like, it doesn't exist. So there's not anything out there right now that will focus on student thinking. It just doesn't exist. And I went, dang it. Because I knew that meant one of two things. Either I was going to have to settle for traditional math, or I was going to have to create something. And since my why was all about thinking and creative, problem solving and reasoning, I knew that I couldn't just settle for traditional math. I knew that wasn't going to work. So as I started to mentor, I started to create because I had to. And so that's kind of the journey that I went on and why I started my process. So it is clear that the chief end of mathematical study must be to make the students think. So that's kind of like sums up what I believe math should be for. Because I think even though we do use basic calculations every day, and there's definitely some useful math, and maybe in a job someday, I feel like there's so much more to math that if we're really going to spend half an hour on it every day, if that's really a core part, then it needs to be something more meaningful in my mind. It needs to be something that really is going to make the students think, right? It's really going to build their thinking, their problem solving, because that's something that every child is going to use. Not just every child, that all of us are going to use every day, is that ability to think, to plan, to problem solve, because that's super important. So now it's really cool. Once I started to implement this why, this is Jeremy. He was one of my very first students. And he came to his mom one day and he said, Mom, if I have to do one more problem in my Saxon book, I am going to hate math. And don't you wish you kind of had that warning? It's like, warning, I'm going to start hating math, so pay attention to me. And he told him on that. He's like, I'm just going to start hating it. And so I came and I started to teach him with this new why in mind. I really just want this boy to think, to problem solve. I want to give him plenty of opportunities, plenty of experiences to do that. And so we kind of, just tossed the textbook aside, and I was like, let's just think and plan and figure it out. And so as we started to do this, it was really cool to see his attitude change. He went from being like, math, I guess I have to do it, to being like, oh, this is so cool. Oh, this is so fun. I'm seeing these cool things. And it was just really awesome to see that change in him, where all of a sudden math was something exciting and something that he can be passionate about. So that was really cool. Are we okay? Can we see? Oh, I think you're muted again. That's okay. All right.
There's just an obstruction. Oh, there. It's getting better now, actually.
Okay. All right. Just making sure.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So once we kind of have that why in place, then we can kind of see the benefit that it will have for them. Then it's kind of, we have to think about who needs to mentor. And I bring this up because I feel like there are several different mentors in homes right now. Obviously the parent, and I know that you're all here because you believe that, right? You believe the power of the parent in the home as a mentor. But I think that sometimes even parents can kind of turn, especially with math, they can kind of turn that mentoring over to some sort of program, some sort of textbook, where all of a sudden they're kind of removing themselves from that mentoring role, especially when it comes to math, where it's like, all right, here's the teaching textbook DVD, or whatever program they're doing, go have fun, go learn, right? And so I think it's important, if that's our choice, right? This is a question that we need to ask ourselves. I can't answer that for you. But if it's our choice, we need to be very careful about who is mentoring based on who we think is going to do the best job for our child. Now, I have a lot of experience in the mentoring part because I had the world's best mentor as a mother. So I was really, really blessed. In fact, it was Mother's Day. And so I got to think a lot about her and her incredible ability to just be a fantastic mentor. And so I want to know, just if you don't mind, some of the traits that you think make a really good mentor. Something that you think they need to be a good mentor. Any ideas on that?
Patience.
Patience. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we feel that more as parents, as a mentor, right? Of how much patience we need to really help them. Awesome. Anything else? We got to love the mentee. I love that. There needs to be a sense of love there. That's fantastic. Compassion, clear thoughts. Oh, I like that one. Patience for sure. Communication is a good one. Yeah. Right? The ability to communicate. They love what they're teaching. Yeah, those two aspects of love. You love the student and you love what you're teaching. There has to be some sort of passion for the subject there. Awesome. Willing to hold the mentee accountable, right? Willing to push them. I like that. Love of learning, thinking outside the box, imagination. That's a cool one. Not tell, inquire. That's fantastic.
I love that.
That's fantastic. Because you're right. You're a better mentor if you're asking questions and getting them to think, right? Our why is to have them think, and giving them opportunities to do that. And so being a mentor who inquires of them is a great skill. Have a bigger vision of the why than the mentee. So really seeing that big picture and knowing why that they're doing it. I love that. Be a role model by being involved and being positive. That's awesome.
And I think the flip side of what Dion's saying too is also to have a bigger vision of the student than they have.
Yeah.
To be able to see where they can go.
Yeah, and what they can become. That's awesome. They have to listen. That's great. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that a mentor should be and can be. I don't think mentoring is a natural thing necessarily for most. It's definitely something that we practice, but it's a joy to practice mentoring. I find it as a joy to practice mentoring. To practice patience sometimes is difficult, but the inquiring and the loving them is easy, right? The loving them is easy. And so being a role model for learning and that love of learning, and if our expectation is to help them think and problem solve, then we have to be a role model for that, for thinking and problem solving and doing things that are hard And I think sometimes as a mentor, no matter what the topic or subject, that can be a challenge to learn. And so we are an example in that moment of doing something that is difficult or hard. I've had a lot of parents that I've worked with who have come into math thinking this is going to be really difficult, and I'm not a good mathematician. I'm not a great mentor or teacher, and so I'm not sure how to do this. But as they've worked through that, they've seen the example that their struggle has on their students when their students are struggling. So that's been really cool to see. Okay, awesome. I love all those. So now my mom was a fantastic mentor, and I had some really bad mentors as well. So like my high school experience, I had your typical traditional math teachers where they just stood up at the front of the board, they did their problems, they sat behind their desk while you worked, right? Where there wasn't much love there. You didn't even know if they liked math at all. You kind of wondered why they were doing what they were doing. And anyway, so I had kind of both spectrums. And honestly, even though I was really good at math, high school kind of beat the love of math out of me a little bit. And so I was with my mom, and it was my first semester at BYU, and we were kind of looking at the list of possible majors I could have. And my mom immediately went to the math education major because she loves education, she loves math. So that's where she went first, just to kind of look at what kind of classes they had. And the very first class was critical review of school mathematics. And I kind of like looked back at my experience, and I was like, I've been critically reviewing school math for a really long time, because I knew how terrible some of my experiences were compared to what they could be. And so I was like, oh man, I'm gonna ace this class. And so I decided to be a math education major, and mostly because of my mother, I'm sure. And I walked into my very first class on my very first day. And I remember my teacher pushing all the chairs aside. So this is the story Brenda remembers. And he said, all right, you have to pick a corner based on whether you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree on a certain phrase that I'll give you, a topic. And the very first one he said was, every student can learn math. So that was the very first one. So in my mind, from my experience, all the chats that I had with my mother, I like stormed on over to that strongly agree corner. Because yes, I knew every student could learn math. I saw my mom do it. I saw her because I was in her 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade class in a public school. So that was kind of cool. But I saw her actually do that with students who felt like they were no good at math, and kind of bring that love alive in them and get them to be good at it and passionate about it. So anyway, I've seen it. And so I walked over to that strongly agree corner, and I turned around, and I'm not kidding you, I'm the only one there. There were like 2 other in the agree corner, and of the 30 students in my class, the rest of them were on the other side. They disagreed that student can learn math. Isn't that weird? Isn't that crazy? And now these aren't like your normal people. These were aspiring math educators at BYU, of all places, that did not actually believe that every student could learn math. And I was floored. Like, I just couldn't believe it. And at the same time, I had this sense of, this is how I felt. I was like, I got this. Like, I have a mission. In fact, not even a mission, it's a calling. I feel like I've been in this position where I need to share my message. So that's kind of when it all started. For me, was that I knew every student could learn math, and I did not want this kind of negativity. And even though I think they were well-meaning, I don't know. I don't know why they were over there. I didn't get it. But I felt like I needed to share this. I needed to find a way. And so I got my very first teaching job at Yuma High School in Yuma, Arizona, which is like right in the corner of California and Mexico, like right down there. And our mascot was the Criminals. No kidding. I didn't like make this up because they were like, that's the mascot. In fact, the mascot was had like a prison, head, and like the stripes and everything, and the ball and chain. It's hilarious. It was super funny. And I thought, this is gonna be great, because I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna inspire all of my 200 students to just love math and be passionate about math, and they're going to go to MIT, all of them, and it's going to be fantastic. And I thought this will just make a great part of the movie that they're going to make about me someday, right? And so I was just pumped going into it. And I remember my first day of teaching that I had like nightmares about, but I was still super excited for. And I had laid out a bunch of papers on their desks, and I grouped their desks into groups, right? Not the rows, because that's lame. So I grouped them into groups, and I put paper out. And the very first assignment that they had when they first walked in the door was to create a tower as tall as they could make it out of paper. I thought, I'm the coolest math teacher, right? I'm so cool. And they literally, more than half of them, I'd say 75% of them, just sat there and looked at me. Like, who do you think you are trying to get me to do something like this? Like, this is not the norm. This is not what's supposed to happen. And I was like, come on, anything you want to do, like at least touch the paper, like at least try something. And, you know, a few of them like wadded them up and threw them at each other, which at least they were touching the paper, right? But I was so surprised. And I found as I was teaching, I only taught in high school for a year. But as I was teaching, I realized that they were not ever expected to think for themselves. That was not ever an expectation. And as much as I could do for my 1 hour a day with them, 5 days a week, there was stronger forces at play. And part of the culture down there was that they were very family oriented, which was great, but they weren't really expected. I mean, there wasn't much reading going on in the home. They weren't playing games. They weren't really doing any sort of education. Education wasn't very important down there. And so having someone at home encouraging them to think for themselves and to figure things out just wasn't happening. And so even though I could try my best, and I did, I spent probably 90% of my teaching time motivational speaking. In fact, I should have gotten a degree in motivational speaking because that probably would have served me better than math teaching. But it was just, I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I was not in the position that there needed to be, right? It needed to be happening in the home. There's no school equal to a decent education or a decent home, and no teacher equal to a virtuous parent. So really, it has to happen in the home. I've learned that. And I know the love that parents can have, and that has such an impact on what students are able to do and are willing to do. Oh, sorry, I'm reading these comments. They're fantastic. Okay, but I'm going to keep moving so we can answer some questions as well. But there are some things that you can do. So I don't want you to feel discouraged, because the great part is that you have a great influence to create thinkers in your home. And I wanted to give you just a few ideas here. And Brenda, can I send these slides out to them too, so they don't have to?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. And can I give you a pointer too? So we're having a lag on part of the screen.
Oh, okay.
I don't think you see it on yours, but when you move your mouse over the left-hand side, like where the numbers are, it loads it the rest of the way. So if you can remember to run your mouse down it every time you flip a screen. Yeah. I don't know.
I can do that. I can do that.
Okay. But yeah, we can send out the slides. Yeah, it's loaded.
Okay, good. And that way I can send the slides too. So if for some reason they don't load, you can get those.
Okay.
But there are a few things that you can do. Believe in your students' innate ability. So you have to believe that they can. You need to be one of those that walks over to that strongly agree corner. So if someone says, my kids can learn math, you need to go there. Make sure that they know that you believe in them, right? They need to know it. Give them opportunities to struggle. Encourage them when they struggle. Never tell them how to solve problems, right? Give them those opportunities to solve them. Allow unlimited time to create and to discover. Don't give up on them, and don't let them give up on themselves. And then we have our students make, model, and explain and prove everything. So we're having them constantly communicate, constantly prove their thinking. Okay, so Now you may be thinking, this is great. This is fantastic. We love that our students get to think. I'm excited to teach, but how does this actually happen? Because I was the one who said there actually isn't a curriculum that does this, right? And this is kind of the predicament that I was in, was that I didn't know how to actually implement these great ideas because there wasn't anything out there yet. So I started to teach my nieces and nephews. So this is my brother Dan and his 5 kids, and we just happened to move in 2 doors down from them. So this was right after we'd been in Yuma for a couple of years. And my sister-in-law came to me and she's like, you know what, you're the math person. Can you come teach my kids math? Because I got A's in all my math classes, but I still have no idea what math is. Like, I really just don't quite get it. I'm going to answer this question real quick, and then I'll tell more of the story. She says, if you never show them how to solve a problem, how do you model problem solving? So for me, it's more not telling them how to solve it, but giving them opportunities. And yeah, one could be doing it yourself, so doing problem solving on your own. But questions are an incredible way to help students think and to kind of guide them without taking away their opportunities to learn. So we use question asking a lot. In fact, that's a main part of our teaching style, is that we just ask questions. Because questions can guide, but it's still saying, you know what, you're responsible for learning. You're responsible for solving this problem. And I'll just ask you questions to help you get there. So everyday conversation can involve questioning from yourself, not just the kids. Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, that's a great way to model that, right? Is to ask questions that you would ask yourself. So, I wonder why that is the way that it is, or I wonder how this works, or I wonder how we're going to fix this, right? Asking those kind of questions and allowing them to respond are great ways. So I love that. Anyway, so I started teaching her kids, and I decided that I was just going to allow Jay, their oldest specifically, I was just going to let him think through things. I was just going to let him do it. And so I was like, so Jay, multiplication, what's multiplication? And he'd done a little bit of that. So he knew a little bit. And I'm like, well, how would we do it with like a 2-digit number? How would we do that? He goes, I don't know. All right, let's figure it out. And so I gave him a problem, and I'm like, here's some blocks you can use. Here's some paper and a pencil if you want to draw a picture. Here's a whiteboard if that's more fun for you. So I gave him a bunch of manipulatives and said, all right, let's figure it out. And it was so cool as I saw him, and he was 7 at the time, and the younger they are, the more willing they are to do it. I don't know why. Once they get older, they're like, no, just tell me what to do. It's more efficient that way. And so it was great because he was younger. He was like, all right, yeah, we can do this. And so he started using blocks and manipulatives, and he figured out how to multiply larger numbers. And then he figured out how to divide. And then he figured out how to divide with fractions. Not in that order, obviously there was stuff in between, but he was figuring out everything. And it was so cool to see that. And obviously in homeschooling, once one cool thing happens, all their friends found out about it, right? Where it's like, what's your kid doing in math? He's figuring it out? What? And so they asked me to come teach them, and I started teaching several other homeschooling families, and then getting more and more. And my husband at the time, he was also a math teacher. He just happened to quit his job at that time, and divine providence, I'm pretty sure. And so he started teaching in homes as well. And we just kind of ran out of time to teach students. And we thought, we don't want this to be limited to what we can do. And so that's why we started teaching parents kind of this method. And we came up with a system that we call the discovery method, which is how we help our students figure out every math concept for themselves. So the first thing we have them do is we have them discover. And basically what that is we give them problems that they've never seen before. So, thank you, Val, thanks for the reminder. So we give them problems they've never seen before. So it could be, let's say your student hasn't discovered division yet, and we give them a bunch of story problems, division story problems, so that there's context there. And through the context, they can see patterns as they're kind of collecting these problems and doing these problems just through problem solving logic. They can see patterns, and through those patterns, they can then come up with a hypothesis that is basically the method that we normally just give them. So they can say, oh, I think you take the amount and then you split it into that number of groups and then you count up what's in each group. So that would be like a hypothesis for division. They test out that hypothesis. So they see if it actually does work on every division problem to get to the right answer. And when they do, they come up with their theorem. So here's an example real quick of a theorem that our students have come up with. Over here on the right-hand side, if you can see that, hopefully it's loaded. So this is their hypothesis for multiplying two two-digit numbers. So they say round the first number to the nearest tens place, multiply the new number times the second number using the multiplying tens trick, so something they already created, and so on. I'm not going to read through it all just because it's long. But basically they come up with this kind of step-by-step theorem, which is their own work, right? Their own creation, their own method. We love this way because students aren't being forced to think of math through someone else's lens and understanding. They're thinking of math through their own understanding, so they're creating it. In fact, have you heard the term constructivism before? They're constructing their knowledge based on what they already know. This, one, helps them to really understand and make sense and be able to explain what they're learning. And two, it helps them retain what they've learned because it's connected to something that's already there. It's not just something abstract. So we like to liken it to if you were going to memorize a poem. It's harder to memorize a poem in a language you don't know, right? It's possible to memorize a poem in a language you don't know, but it's much harder because the words don't have any meaning. So for us, we have our students create this so that the math has meaning. There's meaning to it. It's built on something they already know. Let's see, where are we at on time? Okay, so let me walk through real quick. This is an experience that I had with a student whose mom came to me and said, I'm really worried about Adam. This is Adam. I'm really worried about him. He's just not very good at math. And so I started to work with him and allowing him to create and discover and to think for himself. And this is an experience that we had as he was dividing fractions is what we were working on. So we'd already gone through division. He really understood what division meant and how to do it. And we'd gone through fractions, so he understood what fractions meant. In fact, just as a refresher, because it might have been a while, I have my, I'm going to just go over real quick how we divide normally. So if we had 2/3, see this? Oh, it's backwards? I don't know if I can write backwards, but I think you'll get the gist.
Yeah, we actually see it right. You see it backwards, but we see it correctly. Yeah.
Okay, so if we have 2/3 divided by 1/2, our normal would be to keep the first number and then multiply by the reciprocal. Yeah, that's kind of how we would normally do it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the norm. Well, anyway, so what we did with this student is I said, all right, here's 10 problems very much like this one. And I said, all right, let's figure it out. And so like for this one, he actually got out, I think it was like a strip of paper, or it could have even been ribbon, I can't remember. And he actually did it. So he had 2/3 of a yard, and then he, cut it so that we had 1/2 a yard, and he figured out how many and how much of a dress he could make. So he was actually using the context in order to solve these problems. Once he did about 10 of them, he wrote down the problems with their answers. And created a kind of a list. Do you let them know that 3 is the whole of the part and 2 is part of the whole? So he already really understood fractions, so he really understood that concept of what numerator and denominator meant, what those things mean. So we'd already kind of gone through that. So yeah, he would have had a great understanding of that already. So that would have been a foundation already laid. So then he goes through these problems, and oh, I was just wondering how much info you should share is all. Basically, when we go over what fractions mean, I usually have them draw on what they already know. So I have them draw a picture of a circle and have them create half of a circle. And then I have them write down what that fraction would look like. So 1/2. They usually that knowledge is already there, right? They've seen it, whether from siblings or just doing other things in the real world, right? And then I have them make those connections, like, oh, one part is shaded, and there's a 1 up here, and there's 2 parts that make the whole circle, and there's a 2 down here, right? So they can kind of make those connections themselves. So even what a fraction means is something that they can construct, which is super cool. And then once they have this data created, I then have them look for patterns. So what are some things that you notice? At first, this is kind of like, I don't really notice much, right? It takes some training to look for these patterns. And now he noticed 3 things, which was really interesting to me that he kind of focused on these 3. And he said, well, maybe it's like multiplying fractions. Because multiplying, you just multiply the numerators and then multiply the denominators. So he said, I noticed that with this, you can divide. So 1 divided by 1 is 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. Same thing down here. 4 divided by 1 is 1, 1 divided by 7, or 4, sorry, and then 1 divided by 7 is 1, which equals 4. And I thought that was really interesting. So he came up with a hypothesis that was you divide the numerators and then you divide the denominators, which in my mind, I'm like, nope, that's not how you do it. But I thought it was kind of cool that he came up with that. And I wasn't going to tell him it's not the way because because of the next step. The next step was to test, right? And so I said, well, great, that's cool. It worked for those 3. Let's test it out and make sure it does work for all of them. So I had him go back and test the ones that the other ones that he didn't see that right away on those, and a few other problems. And so I gave him some more story problems, some more context problems, and he used his hypothesis. He also used logic. So, because you got to check it, right? You got to use your hypothesis, and then you need something to check and make sure your answer is right. So he used his logic to make sure his answer was right. Sometimes when testing a hypothesis, it's also okay to use a calculator, right? So you test your hypothesis and then you use a calculator to see if it really did work. So he tested it. He found out it worked every single time. Worked every single time. And I thought that was amazing. And as I thought about it and kind of worked through it, I realized it really does work every time. It really does. And there's a reason that it does. And in fact, he was sharing this theorem that he created, which was super cool. This is his step-by-step theorem. And he was sharing this with a friend of his who had just come up with his own theorem that was more like the invert and multiply. And his friend goes, oh, that's so cool. First of all, 2 boys talking about math, that was a win for me. But basically, he's like, oh, that was so cool because you could also just make the denominators, like you get a common denominator and then divide, and it's even easier. So it was cool to see them kind of bouncing these ideas off of each other and finding easier, more efficient ways, because this is not the most efficient way, because you end up getting a fraction in a fraction and it ends up being weird. But it does work. And if your students really understand fractions well, which he did, you can simplify them to just one single fraction and kind of get those fractions out. Val says you should make sure the child is looking to prove his pattern by using more than one resource, right? Yeah, so he's doing it on several different problems. Is that what you're saying? Like you need to make sure that he's kind of has every situation covered. So,
well, and like you were saying, he used logic, and he was using whatever the last slide had.
Right,
he was
hypothesis.
Yeah.
So it's good to have a calculator there as well, right? To make sure that there's plenty of resources being checked on. Yeah. So this ended up being his theorem, and for him, this was a point of pride. It was really cool. This is kind of where his turning point was. from being like, oh, math to like, oh, I'm not very good at math to I can do math. Because he came up with something that even I had never seen before. And so it was cool to see him get really excited about this new way. And he did it different than his mom. He did it different than his twin brother, who came up with something different. And so it was really neat to see the pride that he had in having his own method, his own means. And this step-by-step really does work with any math that you're going to teach. So we've done it with combining like terms. In fact, this was cool because once they're trained on kind of this path, this method, all we have to do is say, all right, here's a problem, 3W plus 3W. I want you to figure out what it is. And we just kind of let them go and say, this is an example of combining like terms. So figure out how it works and how you'd combine these. And then I want you to come up with kind of a method for how it would work no matter what variables or numbers you're using. So we kind of gave her like free reign, and she'd been trained. And so she started by saying, all right, I'm going to plug in the number. She had 3 different ideas, and she said, all right, I'm going to plug in the number 2 and see which ones actually match. So she plugged in 2 up here and got 24. Shouldn't have. She'd gotten 12, right? 6. Anyway, she'd gotten 12. Oh, maybe she plugged in 4. She must have plugged in 4. Even though it says 2 over here. Oh, no. She plugged in 4. Sorry. She plugged in 4. She got 24. And then she had 6W was one of her ideas. 3 times W times W2. So you add the 4. You add these 2 and then multiply. Something like that. Anyway, figured it out. I haven't figured this out yet, apparently, but she did. And we also used it for the Pythagorean triples. So we gave them a bunch of Pythagorean triples, and they have figured out the Pythagorean theorem. And we've seen this work on many different ages as well. So my nephew is 11, and he just did this and figured out the Pythagorean theorem. And we've had students, I think he might have been the youngest. I actually think we had someone at 10 figure out the Pythagorean theorem, all the way up to 17, 18 who've been working on this. So we've seen really cool things, and it really does work on everything that we've seen so far. So as far as what to teach, it doesn't, in my mind, it's less important, because remember, it's not about them being able to calculate. It's about them being able to think and problem solve. So for me, a win in my book is when I give my nephew a problem or my student a problem, and they say that they've never seen before, and they say, I can figure it out. For me, that's a win. I just want them to know that they can figure it out, and that they're willing to kind of push through even when it gets frustrating and challenging, and end up with that problem solved. So it's been cool to see what they can come up with. And I really do believe that everyone can be a successful mathematician. And I say everyone. At first I was going to say all kids. But as I've started teaching parents, I've realized that a lot of times the people who doubt the most are parents in their own abilities. So it's usually the mom or dad who goes, I'm not a good mathematician, so how am I going to teach my kid? Everyone can be a successful mathematician. They just need to be given those opportunities. And so starting at the basics ends up being really important. We usually have them start with the basics, because then as a parent, you can understand math in a way you've never seen before. And obviously with our students, we see really cool things too. This was Megan, and she felt super dumb. So she had a super smart older brother and a super smart younger brother who both were doing math that she wasn't doing yet. And so for her, she just felt like, oh, I'm just dumb. I just can't do math. But she was very creative. So she loved the art. She loved writing. She loved reading. But math was just not the thing she liked. And we started to work with her, and she was doing Alex math, which is like the pi thing. Seen that one? And I was like, all right, just pick something and just to see what you're doing, because I'd never seen the program before. And so she picked one. She did the problem. It was a fraction problem. She did it great. She's like, I don't remember how to do this. And I was like, I just figure it out. You can figure it out. So she does it her own way, comes up with an answer, types it in. It wasn't simplified. And so it was marked as wrong. And then she clicked on the box that shows you how to do it. And she said, see, I can't do it. See, I did it wrong. And I was like, no, 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 no. No, you didn't do it wrong. And so then we had to kind of detox, because she had so many experiences like this where she just kept doing things differently and getting problems wrong, that she really did believe that she couldn't. And she really had a very gifted, brilliant mind for problem solving. And so as we allowed that gift to start taking place in her math, it was amazing that the change that happened. She started to really believe that she was smart. She started to gain confidence, not just in her ability to do math, but just overall general confidence. She felt smarter. She felt more accomplished. She felt like she could do it, right? Do anything, because she could figure things out. And it was really cool to see that change in her over time as she really started to believe that. And so for me, this is super important, because I don't want my kids feeling like they're going to have to miss out on opportunities because they can't do math, because they can't figure things out, because they can't problem solve. In fact, I was just talking to a parent at a conference last week or 2 weeks ago who said, she's like, that's why I changed my major in college, because I didn't want to take the math class. She's like, so instead of doing something that I was really excited about and something I loved, I changed because I didn't think that I could do it, because I didn't think I could do the math class. And it was so sad, because for me, and I'm sure this is my mother talking, but I truly believe in the unlimited potential of every human being, right? There's unlimited potential there. And I know that how when you feel that, when you know that, you really can achieve anything. But if you feel, even in one area, that you are limited, or there are things you cannot do, then when things get hard, you kind of fall back on, well, I must just not be good at this. I must just not be able to do this. I must just be dumb, or I must just be, slow, or whatever it is. Like, it's easy for them to revert back as a coping mechanism, where I go, well, instead of struggling and putting myself out there and having the frustration and uncomfortableness that comes with doing something difficult, I'm just going to say I can't and call it good. And that definitely limits our children's potential. And I won't let that happen. I just won't let it happen. And so anyway, so I think this is so important. And I know that when math is taught in this way, they're developing this ability to be resilient in problem solving, and to be able to overcome struggles, and be able to just know that potential that they have. Okay. Questions. We definitely have time. We have time, Brenda, for a couple, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're scheduled to go for another half an hour if we need to.
Fantastic. So. Okay.
Yep. We're good.
That's good. I went longer than I wanted to, of course, because
it was great, though. We needed to hear it. We did. We needed to hear it. It was great stuff.
In fact, there's a question from Julie. She says, are there online mentors out there that will mentor my 13-year-old? I can't even tell you how many times I've been asked to mentor, again, because I love it, but you can do it. So that's part of the reason why we actually have a program where we teach parents how to implement this. So we talk about how to kind of shift our view of what math can be into this kind of problem-solving thinking arena. We talk about how to help them when they're struggling, how to inspire them when they just hate math and don't want anything to do with math. And then we kind of walk through these steps of problem-solving and seeing patterns and writing hypotheses, because communication is a lot of times what kind of trips up students, because they actually have to say what they're thinking, which is a difficult skill. As if you've been a mentor, it's difficult to get out what's in your brain. It's kind of it's a different skill. So we have them practice and work on all of these skills, because these skills are the things that are going to be more important to them later on than any sort of math calculation ability will be. Where do we go for that training? Okay, you can go to my website, MathInspirations.com. That will kind of explain a little more. There's a place that you can go to sign up for our trainings. I also have opportunity for you to do a free consultation if that's something you're interested in doing, and chatting with me about kind of a plan and where to go next. I can answer questions that way. Again, just go on my website, and when we send out the slides, maybe I can send a link for those. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we can send anything out, but you know, Emily's website is so easy to find. It's MathInspirations.com.
Yeah.
So when we're done sharing the screen, I know you guys don't have control over your own screens right now, but when that comes, you can jump in.
I can not
if you
share.
Wanna, yeah, if you want to close the sharing.
How do I not share? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, up at the top.
I don't know. Oh, there it is. I found it. Okay.
There we go. Yeah.
There we go. Now you have your screens back.
In fact, here, I'll type it in and everybody can just, oh, it didn't link it, but.
Looks like it did in the comments in the chat.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't come up as a link for me, but if it comes up for everybody else, that's great. So yeah, you should be able to click on that and go straight to our website. And then how can we make a consult with Emily?
So on the homepage, there's two options. You can sign up for our starter kit, which if you have friends who aren't here, the best way for them to get information about us is actually to sign up for that starter kit. So there's like a brief version of what I just told you about. There's a couple other videos. And I don't, some of you may have already gone through that and been through that. You can also, the second little button is to request a free consultation. So you just can click on that and you can schedule one of those with me as well. And we just chat about your math and kind of how I can help with that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's more well-equipped to help with math than you, Emily.
Oh, I love doing it. I just love doing it. Talking to parents is one of my favorite things because it's so, I mean, maybe I'm on a Mother's Day kick, but it's so cool to see the love that moms have for their kids and what they're willing to do for them. So talking to them about it is just so fun. I love being able to help with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions?
Julie asked a question about the recording. I would like to have them register if possible first, so maybe you could even register them if that's okay with them. And then we'll send them out the video recording. And actually, I usually do that the same day. So it's usually ready within like, you know, an hour. And we'll just see. I actually have a couple appointments today, so maybe by 5 or 6, it'll be up. Now,
yeah.
Val, you're awesome.
Well, and for me, okay, have you ever read A Mathematician's Lament? Have any of you read that one? It's fantastic. In fact, I'll make sure to include a link. Actually, if you just search A Mathematician's Lament, you can get a whole PDF online. It's about this guy who just says basically that he makes an analogy to music and how right now we learn math like if we learn music like we learn math, then what we would do is we give kids sheet music and have them memorize like the different, you know, treble clefs and the different notes. And then like by the time they get to like 8th or 9th grade, then we might actually have them like do something on a piano. But how we spend so much time on just the procedural part of it that we don't allow them to just do math. So I love that you put do math in quotes, because you're right. We want them to actually do it, to problem solve, to be mathematicians, because mathematicians don't follow anyone else's process. They discover and they create and they figure it out. So that's great.
Awesome. Nancy says, I shared that with my pyramid project this semester. Oh, the Mathematician's Lament. Nancy, is that? You know, I was looking at it. I actually did start reading it once before, and it was a fun read.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Oh, Dion, you're welcome. You're welcome. Anybody else have any other questions for Emily? Like, I liked, Emily, where you started talking about the detox that had to happen. Any recommendations for that, as you've probably seen it several times?
Yeah. In fact, I recommend it for almost everybody to do a little detox, because especially if your kids are just hating math, they don't like math. If math is a struggle, if there's any frustration there, we stop math altogether and we play games. We just play games. There's some really great math games out there. In fact, we have a math games book that comes with our course that we send out with our course. It's called Hands on Math. And any game that involves logic, problem-solving strategies are going to be great tools in helping build their mathematical thinking. Chess is fantastic, for sure, but there are a lot of other ones. So there are a lot of other games, but that kind of have that same type of thinking as chess that might be a little bit simpler. I know some students that just don't like chess. So we play different types of games. There's one that's called 4 in a row, where there's a bunch of boxes and you just have to get 4 of your color in a row and you take turns. That's a really fun one. Poison is great, where you lay out 13 beans or Skittles or blocks or something, and you take 1 or 2 on your turn, and you don't want to be the person to take the last one. So that's really fun, super simple. So any age can play it, but there's some definite strategy involved, which makes it a little bit more fun. So games is great. We also do a lot of logic training. So we do puzzles like Sudoku, or even just basic logic puzzles. In fact, if you go to printablepuzzles.com or puzzlebaron.com, we have a ton of just brain puzzles that kids can do to, again, build that mathematical thinking without it being math in your face, right? Where it's just fun and logic, and they're still exercising that brain, but they're not feeling overwhelmed by math. So those are some things that you can do. And Val, doing so many board games in your home is going to really help that ability. And so then once they kind of have that ability and those games, then you have to just kind of figure out how to tie that into math, where you're like, this is like a puzzle that we're going to solve. We're going to discover this new way of doing it. It's going to be your own way, like a puzzle, because it really is like a puzzle. Math is just something that has figured out, and you find strategies and patterns till you come up with a strategy that works for every problem. Can you do this in groups? How about groups of differing age and abilities? We, so far, have not done groups yet, but I do have parents who have. So there are certain parts that I feel need to be done independently, like writing their hypothesis. They need to come up with their own. So you need to make sure that they're given that opportunity to come up with their own and not steal someone else's, which is easy to do if you're in a big group setting. The discovery is great. You can do that in groups or have them do it themselves, because, I mean, they can do it with other people in different abilities. Games are great in group settings. So there are bits and pieces, but if you're doing it with students, make sure their parents are on board. Because when we first started teaching, we realized that we would kind of get everything set up and we'd give them an assignment, and the next time we would meet with them, they would come with everything done. We'd be like, oh, all right, so how'd you figure this out? Oh, my mom told me. And we're like, right? Because that's like opposite of what we wanted. And so so just make sure that that everyone knows the system, right? They know that they're not supposed to tell them what to do, and have to help their kid just struggle through and ask questions. Because when our kids get frustrated, the mom instinct is to go, all right, let me help you. Let me show you. Let me do this for you, right?
I have a better idea. How about if we have a class in Commonwealth that teaches the moms how to teach it, instead of that has the kids in the class? And who wants to teach it in my Commonwealth? Because I want to learn.
I think there's a way where you could maybe do it where you like met once a week and had students share their experiences and their theorems with each other, right? Where you're like, oh, this week we're gonna, write a theorem for this. The only drawback, the only thing that might not work is if your student goes at different paces, right? Which often happens. So you have to make sure there's enough time. I guess we did try this once with a group of 10-year-old boys. There were 6 10-year-old boys. And I had one student that ended up being super bored because he kind of got it all and he'd already done a lot of it. And anyway, so he ended up being super bored. And there was one student who just took more time and he felt like he was kind of pulling everyone back. So anyway,
It's hard.
So give it a try, but it's hard. I think my goal is to figure it out someday, but not yet.
Yeah. So how about, let's see, who's Love at Homeschool right here? I like this comment that she says that her daughter won't play because she suspects it's math and avoids it. It sounds like she's suspicious, right? And what would you
say? Because she suspects it is math.
Right?
So one other thing that we do, and we did with our students and we have our parents do with their kids, is we do what's called a pre-interview. So basically an opportunity for you to just sit down with your kid and say, let's talk about math. Let's just talk about it. What don't you like about it? What do you like about it? What's hard? What's not hard? Do we even need it? So having this kind of a conversation that we're having, why do we even have math as part of our study, right? So who do you want to mentor you, right? Those kind of questions, they need to be on board with that. Because if they're going to fight you on math, then they're never really going to learn, because our brains just don't function that way. If we're feeling frustrated or angry, it's so much harder to think than when we're feeling excited and happy. That's just our brain chemistry. It's how it works. And so I would just sit down and have a conversation with her first and say, you know what? Let's talk about math. Why is math such a hard time? What's going on? And then maybe say, make sure it's something that she knows is important and needs to do. If she doesn't, then just don't do math for a little while. I read this awesome article about this teacher who taught all of math in 20 hours. Took 20 contact hours with his students to teach all of math. So once they get to a point where they're ready and they're feel the importance of that, then it doesn't take long to get the material in, right? So it's okay to take a break and just not do math for a little while. They might need more of a real hands-off detox experience. And then once you start up again, kind of find out what they want to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, that's good. That's good information for us. I think that vision casting, letting them know, being really clear and open and communicating with them why we need it, why you're going through the detox, and explain to them you're going through a detox.
Totally.
Don't, that doesn't need to be a secret.
Yeah.
Hey, we're just going to hands off for a little bit and just play, because I think that's what you need right now. So I love that.
Yeah, I find the more upfront we can be with our kids, the better received it all is, right? Because really it's not our education, it's their education. And so they should be as involved as possible in the decision-making process. And you are a mentor, you're a guide. Because if they own it, if they take responsibility, then they're way more invested in doing it. So, absolutely.
Love that. Okay, anything else? Any other questions?
Sounds cute.
Awesome. I know. It's so fun. It's so fun to see families and Nancy, we're talking about your kids. They're adorable.
Hi.
Yes, I will say hi. Hi, girls.
Starting with teens, yes. Logic training, I would say do first. So when it comes to like an ACT, SAT, which a lot of parents come to me because they're kind of stressed because their kids are behind in math and now they're approaching this age where they're going to have to start prepping for that. The best thing you can do is just start logic training. Start building their ability to think, because that's the thing that takes the longest to develop, because it's like our muscles, right? Our muscles just take a while to strengthen. We might be able to learn a new skill fairly quickly, but we have to have the strength for it first. So our brain is very similar, where we have to have the muscles in place. So we have to have those skills, the ability to think outside the box and to think creatively, think logically. They have to be in place before we can really jump into kind of this deeper exploration of what math means. But that being said, there's time to kind of go over that ACT. So once you start in on the math, then you just have them figure it out. So you say, all right, let's talk about the basics. What does this problem mean? What's it telling us? Let's figure out how we would manipulate this to come up with an answer. They're great test-taking skills too, because a lot of times their kids are going to see things on tests they've never seen before. The ACT loves throwing in things that aren't in normal rotation because they want to test their ability to problem solve. But your students, especially after logic training and through that discovery method, are going to be super prepared for that because they've had tons of opportunities to discover for themselves. So they won't be fazed by that at all.
That makes sense. Wise counsel.
Thanks.
For sure. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and close. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Emily, especially for doing this for us. And we're going to make the recording available to everyone. We'll get the slides out, so I'll get those from Emily today. And what else was there? Was there a couple of links? But I think we went over them pretty much, right?
Yeah, if you get on my website, you should be able to find things pretty easy. But I'll have you send out my email address too, so if anyone has questions, they're welcome to email me. So.
Awesome. Okay. She's fantastic, by the way, don't you think? Big thumbs up. Yes, we love you, Emily. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, have a fantastic day, and we'll get that stuff out to you right away. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye, guys. You're welcome.